well, we basically know which direction it'll move now. It'll move towards the front, basically the front of the ship. And the question, in my opinion, now is going to be how fast that flip happens. So now that you're basically guaranteeing that it turns in a certain direction, you also have to kind of worry about how fast it moves in that direction, because you don't want to turn so quickly that you cause a lot of fuel sloshing. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see in general how the booster performs during that maneuver.
Yeah, interesting to see that, as well as during the landing sequence having one of those three center engines out and bringing in one of the middle ring engines to compensate for that. Obviously, testing a bad day case scenario will be an important
One
thing
one thing to
for
add
SpaceX
onto
to work
that.
through and make sure that they can address that should it happen unintentionally in a future flight, right?
Yeah, one thing to add about that. I've always been under the assumption that they needed as much vent capability as they can get in order to reduce the damage to the top of the booster. Like, you just want as much of the volume of gas that you're putting out to be able to escape. So by blocking a little bit of it, you're actually increasing the amount of pressure in the interstage. On other vehicles that do hot staging, that typically results in the actual destruction of the hot stage interface. So it will be interesting to I imagine that's part of the test here as well, is to figure out if the actual hot stage ring can handle it, because there is a possibility, a non-zero possibility, that it could actually destroy the hot stage ring, um, at least the front side of it, as the ship is firing those engines. Not gonna lie, I kind of want to see that, as long as it doesn't affect what the booster has to do after, because I'm pretty sure it could probably, since it's gonna jettison the hot stage ring anyways, as long as it doesn't damage the booster, I think it would actually be kind of cool to see a failed hot stage ring.
Yeah, all these developments are really interesting to watch. I mean, it's quite a program to have on display, being that it is so iterative in nature. The choices that SpaceX is and is not making, um, really says a lot about their thought process throughout this whole thing. And speaking of going into the thought process, actually within just the last couple of minutes, we saw a new piece by Stephen Clark's colleague Eric Berger over at Ars Technica, who had the opportunity to speak with Elon Musk ahead of today's planned launch attempt coming up in just about 8.5 minutes. So, Stephen, I don't know if you've had a chance to read through your colleague's work. Obviously, you've been on the line with us for our broadcasts, but if you've had a chance to peruse some of Musk's answers from that, I wonder what kind of jumped out at you from that back and forth.
Well, wait.
Steven, just checking to see that we got you still here with us. And we're having a little bit of technical difficulty with Stephen Clark's mic, so we're going to go ahead and bring him back in just a little bit. Just one thing, maybe Zach, if you want to hop on this one, just looking. Oh, okay. I hear we have Stephen Clark back on the horn. Stephen, can you hear me all right?
Yes, loud and clear, Will. Can you hear me?
Perfect. Got you back. All right. So, Just wondering if you had a chance to peruse your colleague Eric Berger's latest write up with his conversation with Elon Musk in the run up to this launch. Just what were some of your top line thoughts coming out of that?
Yeah, just reading through it now, as a matter of fact, and I think it just reiterates the fact that this is still an experimental program, still a test flight, and they've learned some things about the engine bay on the Starship in these last two flights that have been ended prematurely, and obviously there was the resonance, the vibration issue on Flight 7, and then something literally, I guess, broke in one of the Raptor engines on Flight 8 that led to its demise. And Elon Musk tells my colleague Eric Berger that he feels like there's about an 80% chance that they've got those issues resolved. And just reading through his comments, he said they had to tighten bolts that attach the thrust chamber to the injector head on the engine, and they had to work on some of the seals and get some of those technical issues resolved. I'm still reading through the story, so bear with me. I'm going along as I'm talking, because this just went public just a few minutes ago. So and it's in a Q&A format. So I'm just reading through it as many of our listeners probably are.
Yeah, so as you peruse that, Zach, just to bring you in on one of the things that was just mentioned as we're hearing that the range is still green, still looking good. In one of his comments, Musk told Eric Berger with Ars Technica that the timeline for flying the Raptor 3 engines is, according to Musk, at the end of this year. Does that kind of jive with what you were thinking, Zach, based off of what we're able to publicly see on the development of the super heavy booster and where the ship upper stage is this time that the end of the year is realistic for Raptor 3?
Yeah, that was one thing I kind of predicted in my latest episode, that they're probably at least 6 months out from that. Um, it's a bit difficult to. I mean, I'm glad we have confirmation on that. It was difficult to actually speculate on that specific topic because of just the things that we've seen. So NASA Spaceflight does have their McGregor testing facility cameras, and through those cameras over the last few months, we've seen several failed Raptor 3 tests where it actually results in, an engine rud. So it does seem like they've been encountering issues with Raptor 3 development. Um, I think that another part of this potentially is related to the issues that they've seen on the latest V2 ships, having to potentially go back and make modifications to those engines to make sure that they don't have that same issue, whatever that issue actually is. Um, so yeah, I mean, this also, by saying that Raptor 3 will be available by the end of the year, that also kind of fits with what we're seeing with the first version 3 booster. So right now they're still performing structural, or they're preparing to perform the first structural verification tests on the booster, the booster test tank 17, which is currently at Massey's. So they have an upgraded landing tank inside of there. Also, there's a completely new um, thrust puck and engine mount design on that. So they're in the process of testing that, and also simultaneously stacking the first version 3 booster right now. So based on the timelines that we've seen between initial stacking, cryo testing, um, static fire testing, and actually launching, it does make sense that that first launch on pad B, and with the version 3 booster and with Raptor 3, will all happen near the end of this year.
Well, we are now just less than 3 minutes away from the planned launch of Starship Flight 9, the next big milestone towards getting to those Raptor 3s at the end of the year, if all holds true. At this point, the ship prop load will have wrapped up. We're looking actually with T minus 2 minutes and 20 seconds now. The ship should be fully loaded with its propellant for today's flight, both on the ship and the upper stage. Again, the SpaceX launch director will make their call on The go for launch coming up here at about T minus 30 seconds. Although we are hearing from SpaceX commentators that they are going to hold at T minus 40 seconds. So a hold will come into play once you see the SpaceX clock hit the T minus 40-second mark. Our clock will also freeze as well. Standing by for some information here. Let's go ahead and listen into SpaceX commentary.
We will expect to see the clock pause at T minus 40. And then again, we've got a couple of minutes. They can work through the issues. If we're able to clear them, we can still launch today. If it's something that we can't, we can always stand down, turn around, recycle, fly again tomorrow.
Again, that's really important. This is what terminal count is exactly for, is to be checking the vehicle, monitoring the vehicle systems as it makes its way down to T0. And again, this gives us the ability to catch anything and be able to hold, as Dan has been saying, and recycle if we need to, or pause so that we can work through those issues and see if it's something that we need to stand down for. And as Dan mentioned, we will be holding at T minus 40 seconds, so in about 20 seconds from now.
Yeah, so we'll hold there, and they'll work through these final checkouts on, sounds like just one of those Raptors on the first stage on Super Heavy, which, as you said, we're reflying it for the first time. 29 of those 33 engines have already been used in a launch, one of which has already launched
Twice, and
twice,
we'll go for
and
its
is getting ready for its
third
third. All right,
time.
and you just heard our flight director for the day, Joe Sliker. He just shared that we are going to hold at this T minus 40-second mark. Keep an eye on one of those Raptor engines on booster.
Yeah, it looks like they're holding for just one of those engines. That's interesting. It must be one of the ones that's involved in their planned experiment during the landing maneuver, because I would imagine having one engine unavailable is not enough to normally stop them from initiating the final
And
countdown.
if you're just now jumping in, we are holding still at T minus 40 seconds. Watching one engine, waiting for temperatures to kind of get to a zone that we want them to on one of the engines on the booster, on the Super Heavy booster, getting ready for its second ever flight. So we'll just continue to hold. Again, we can hang out here for several minutes. We held for a while on the first attempt last time and then cleared it, and then we triggered a different issue on the ground side.
But again, this is exactly what it's for. This gives us the best chances at success.
And the clock is rolling.
There we go.
All right.
And we do have a resumption of the clock. Now we're less than 30 seconds in real time. To hear the call of the flight director is go for launch. Standing by. We're at hold again. Following the go-ahead for a go for launch, a hold was called once again. You see the clock has pushed back to T minus 41 seconds.
Yeah, luckily for us, they did not trigger the deluge system during that countdown, or else we would be looking at an abort.
Yeah, that's a really important point there, Zach, since, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it takes at least a day, if not potentially up to 48 hours to make sure that the deluge system is back up to its full levels, right, before it can make another launch attempt if it's triggered.
Yeah, for sure. I guess it's a bit of a question whether or not part of the abort sequence also aborts the deluge system. So it may potentially be pre-programmed to just do the full thing that it's expected to do instead of stopping as soon as the abort is triggered. So that would be the big question on, how much water is actually pushed through that system, how long it takes to recycle. Yeah, so a lot of questions there. As far as the booster or the actual vehicle goes, I don't know if they've specifically said their capability for holding, but given that the prop load time has basically been cut in half from 90 minutes down to 45, I would imagine that they at least have 45 minutes of hold time available.
Well, they did mention they have several minutes, which didn't sound quite as optimistic as 40, though that would be nice for them to have that much margin. We are hearing that there is a tower-related ground side issue that they are currently looking into and figuring out if this is something that can be worked through now or if they're going to have to stand down for today's launch opportunity. The very latest from SpaceX as they continue to hold at the T-minus 40-second mark.
Yeah, that's interesting. It must be the QD arm, if I had to guess, because I would imagine that would be one of the only things that would stop them, considering they're not planning to catch the booster. So, interesting call out there.
Yeah, I mean that sounds very reasonable. Just like I said, given although even if the tower is not going to be used for a catch, are there still receivers on the tower that they would still have in the loop to monitor the booster, sort of like what they did for some of the earlier flights where they weren't intending to catch it, but we're going through some of the internal and external motions? Or do you think that
I mean,
that's
if they wanted,
not in the loop for something like this?
if they for some reason still plan to simulate a booster catch, yeah, I could see that being a thing. I'm not. I'm not sure how critical the rest of the tower is for actually, capturing telemetry or anything like that during flight. So, or actually communicating with the vehicle. That's a question we no longer know the answer to.
And Zach,
They used
I'm
to have.
gonna sorry to cut you off. It sounds like they're potentially coming up to a decision point here. So let's go ahead and listen into SpaceX commentary, and we'll hop back in just a moment.
All right, so we are getting to a resolution. We're going to reset everything.
Not entirely clear what reset everything means in this case. They're currently still
I
holding
think it means
T-minus
Control
40.
Alt Delete and then reboot.
All right, so we're going to see the clock. It is now rolling.
Here we go.
We essentially.
And Zach, to your point, they noted there was an issue with the quick disconnect, and note that there may be another issue. Looks like they're going. The water deluge system is activated. Less than 10 seconds. Engine ignition. And we have movement. Liftoff of Starship on Flight 9. And for just the 9th time, the full Starship integrated stack has cleared the tower. About 40 seconds into flight. All 333 Raptor engines have ignited at this point. Vehicle's about to pass through max Q, the point of greatest aerodynamic pressure. Confirmation of max Q. About a minute and a half to hot state or super heavy MECO. Most engines cut off, and then a hot staging seconds afterwards. Looks like good on camera or onboard views. Clear picture, nice view of the Texas coastline. Mexico as well. This is the first flight of a reused super heavy booster with 29 of those 33 Raptor engines flying once again. Still appears to be a good initial burn. Coming up on about 30 seconds before super heavy MECO. Most engines cut off. And we've got staging in real time. Separation. SpaceX feed coming in on a slight delay, so we'll see these events replicated beyond our tracking cameras here in Starbase, thanks to Lat Padre. Coming up on 3 minutes in flight. And you can see the ship upper stage just off the edge of the Super Heavy. Boost back burn still in play. Just about 15 seconds away from the end of the boost back burn in real time. Again, for those who may just be joining in for the first time in this broadcast, the Super Heavy booster will not be attempted to be caught by the tower. Coming up at about T plus 6 minutes and 19 seconds will be the Super Heavy landing burn start. Seeing some good views from the ship upper stage S-35. Continuing to climb at about 111 kilometers in altitude. We're a little less than 2 minutes to the start of the Super Heavy landing burn here. Seeing some of the excess liquid oxygen being dumped. This is intentional on the booster stage. You can still see the hot staging ring. Actually, that's that little dot just beneath the booster in this tracking cam view.
Uh-oh. Bit of a fire in the aft section. That is no
Oh,
bueno.
yeah, I can see a little bit of irregularity.
That could be the nitrogen purge system, though.
Yeah, they haven't mentioned anything about that, so hopefully that's intentional. Coming up on 5.5 minutes into flight.
It is burning blue, I'll note.
Yes.
Yeah.
Of course, the sun angle isn't helping with getting good visibility on that. The glow that you're seeing in the aft section of the Super Heavy booster, that is not the burn starting just yet. That is just the glow of the heat off of the shielding there. Coming up on the start of the landing burn. in real time. There you can see it looked like the start of the, yep, there's the, it looks like they lost the booster during the start of the landing burn, which was not intention. That was not the intention. Unclear if that was actually the landing burn itself. So while they were not intending to recover the booster, they also were not intending to lose it during the landing burn. So that'll be something that SpaceX will be looking at. Coming up now on about 7 minutes, 15 seconds into the flight of the ship upper stage. We'll see if they get through this point. The last two flights, they were unable to get through the conclusion, the intended conclusion of the upper stage engine burn. Now, a nominal ship engine cutoff is expected at about T plus 8 minutes and 56 seconds. So just a little more than a minute from now. Less than a minute remaining in this burn.
Got more fire appearing on the right side. And the RVAC nozzle is getting pretty hot.
I did just see some lateral motion, it looked like, in the ship. Like it was yawing a bit. It's hard to tell for sure.
Yeah, interesting that they don't have the previously used ship orientation. Oh, there it goes. All right, there
Yeah,
go
look at that glow.
the Raptors, or the Raptor vacuum engines have shut down. Sea level should be shutting down right about now. Confirmation of ship engine cutoff by SpaceX. And this is already farther than they were able to get with flights 7 and 8. So really important milestone for the Starship program to get to this point. Now,
Is that motion normal?
A bit difficult to tell.
it did seem a little bit more than I would have expected. Kind of hard to gauge the orientation here without the Earth view. Now about 10 and a half minutes into the flight, assuming all continues to go as SpaceX intends, we're coming up on the payload deployment demonstration, which would be the first time that Starship would deploy any kind of payload. It's got 8 dummy Starlinks on board. You can see actually the door that is right there in the middle of the ship that is being reflected on by the sun from this angle. So as we continue to watch these upper stage views, Stephen, I'll bring you back in first. Just your initial thoughts on the first time a Block 2 version of the ship upper stage has made it to this point in the flight, and what you're expecting with the next couple of milestones here with the payload deployment and the in-space relight demonstration.
Well, certainly they got farther than they did on flight 7 or 8, so we're not going to be worried about any debris falling over Turks and Caicos this time, which is always a good thing. All the discussion about the air traffic disruptions, not an issue with this flight. We'll see what happens next. I'm a little concerned about the motion we're seeing on the ship. Seems to be moving around a lot more than I recall on the previous flights. Looks like that's a beautiful shot there over the Bahamas now, out over the Atlantic Ocean. But not sure what to make of this motion. If it's part of a normal process to maybe thermally stabilize the vehicle, like a barbecue roll, like we see a lot of rockets do to make sure all sides of the vehicle are roughly at equal temperatures. That may be what we're seeing here, but we'll see in the next few minutes if SpaceX moves forward with their next test, which is the Starlink replica or Starlink mock-up deploy test.
Zach, I'll go to you next. Your thoughts on where we are in the mission, and Stephen's thoughts about the orientation of the vehicle that we've seen so far.
Yeah, very interesting. I'm kind of going back and looking at footage again. I was just looking at re-looking at the shutdown there. Very, very interesting differences from past flights. I mean, overall, it seems like everything is fine. I mean, they do have RCS thrusters, so they theoretically should be able to reorient the ship if there is any like odd things going on with that. Um, uh, I guess if they make it to payload deployment, that will be a big sign that everything is going as expected. But I mean, so far everything obviously looks much better than the last two flights, so that is fantastic news. I'm sure they're really happy that they made it past there. I do think that there were still some issues going on there leading up to SECO, and it honestly seemed like it held on by a thread there. So yeah, very interesting. I'm hoping they give more details about that later.
Yeah, certainly hoping they flesh out some of those details as we're now just about 4 minutes away from the payload deployment demonstration. So we'll be watching for the opening of the door as they get ready for that milestone. And as they commentators are just noting, they've only opened the payload bay door once during Starship flight while it was in space along a suborbital trajectory. So that in of itself will be a notable milestone. And then, of course, the actual deployment. Actually, you can see those simulator Starlinks right there now. A look live inside the payload bay of Starship. A rare glimpse inside the interior of this upper stage while it's in flight. Zach, I know obviously you take a very close look at all the opportunities we get for details like that. Brief though it was, did anything jump out at you just there?
Not quite, not quite. I do need to go back and review a few things. I'm like, mine's all over the place at the moment. And then I get distracted by these views of the payload bay, which are pretty awesome right here, nice up close. And I wonder if this is a camera on one of the actual Starlink simulators, because if so, that is going to be pretty amazing if we actually get to see that from the view of the Starlink when it deploys. This
Yeah, that
may
would.
actually be the first one, the lowest one on the rack, which means it'll be looking back at the others. Um,
Well, SpaceX certainly loves to make its renders a reality. So, we've seen the animation of a deployment of Starlink satellites, the actual version 3s. So that'd be pretty nifty if that actually were to come to pass with one of these simulator Starlink satellites. Coming up on just a couple minutes before that milestone comes up, said to happen in about T plus 18 minutes and 26 seconds. So we should see the payload bay door opening here in the next probably about a minute or so in preparation for that.
Yeah, and just looking back again, I think that camera was actually on the wall of the payload section, even though it looked like it was on the one of the Starlinks. I don't think it is. So that would be quite the feat, honestly, to pull that off, because you would need some sort of system communication from the dummy Starlinks back to the ship. So I'm not necessarily expecting to see that, although it would be cool.
Yeah, and as captured by Lab Padre through its great 24/7 live cameras on YouTube, we did get to see views of these simulator Starlinks being loaded on, and they seem pretty basic. So while it would be nice to see them have some kind of camera capability to capture it floating in real time, I would also be shocked to see that happen. Did hear comments that they were unable to open the door all the way. They started the opening sequence, but it wasn't able to open all the way, so they're going to close it, and it sounds like try again. Now, the next milestone in this mission is the in-space relight demo of one of the Raptors on the ship upper stage, so unclear exactly how long they have to fiddle with this, how much margin they have with this part of the mission before they move on ahead. And actually, we just heard the call that they are unable to deploy those Starlink simulators. They have made the call that they're going to be moving on. Taking a live look right now at Mission Control, not in Starbase, Texas. This is Hawthorne, California. Looking back inside the payload bay here, as again, for those who may just be joining us now with the joint live coverage between Lab Padre and Spaceflight Now, Starship was able to successfully launch from Pad A down at Starbase, Texas. The mission got through successful hot staging, and the booster, as it began to orient itself ahead of the start of the landing burn, did have what appeared to be an earlier issue. Unclear exactly if that was as the landing burn was starting or if it was just shortly before the landing burn, but right around that point in the timeline. And so initially the goal was to have the landing burn take place, to shut down those engines, do sort of a staggered experiment where they would have two of the three center engines